Harmony Point was a massive station built in neutral space, where no empire could claim ownership. Its walls were covered in the flags of 100 different species, symbols of treaties signed and wars ended. Today, it might witness the beginning of a new war or the salvation of an existing peace. Yuna walked through the docking corridor with Dae-Young at her side. Her silver skin felt cold, and her heart pounded in strange rhythms, but she kept her head high and her step steady. She had faced death before. This was just another form of battle. Her brother waited in the main conference chamber, with 20 guards arranged behind him in perfect formation. Crown Prince Seolving Taehyun was tall even for a Volante, with silver skin that seemed darker than Yuna remembered, and violet eyes that burned with cold fury. He had their father's strong jaw and their mother's cruel mouth. He had never shown her kindness, not even when they were children. "Sister," he said, making the words sound like an insult. "You dare to show your face after betraying your own blood." "I betrayed no one," Yuna replied calmly. "I chose peace over pointless death. You chose humans over your own species. I chose wisdom over pride." Taehyun's guards shifted uncomfortably. They had expected Yuna to beg or grovel or try to explain away her actions. Her defiance clearly surprised them. "You have been corrupted by these primitives," Taehyun said with disgust. "Look at you standing beside that creature like an equal instead of a master." Dae-Young spoke for the first time. "I am not her master, and she is not mine." Taehyun turned his burning gaze to the human. "You do not have permission to address me." "Animal, I do not need your permission to speak." The guards raised their weapons slightly. Yuna felt tension crackle through the room like electricity before a storm. "Brother," she said quickly, "I did not come here to fight with you, and I came to make you understand." "Understand what?" "That you have abandoned everything we were taught. That you have shamed our family and our empire. I came to make you understand that our teachings were wrong." The words fell into silence. Yuna saw shock flash across her brother's face before his expression hardened again. "Wrong," he repeated. "We were taught that power comes from domination, and that mercy is weakness, and that other species exist only to serve or be destroyed. But the humans have shown me a different way. A weak way. A stronger way," Yuna corrected. "The humans rebuilt their civilization from ashes. And they did it not through conquest, but through cooperation. So they turned enemies into allies and rivals into partners. And in 2 centuries, they built something that could challenge our 10,000-year empire." Taehyun laughed bitterly. "And you think we should learn from them? That the mighty Volante should bow to creatures who live such short, meaningless lives? I think we should learn from anyone who has wisdom to offer, regardless of how long they live. You are a fool, perhaps. But I am a fool who found happiness and purpose and love. So what have you found in all your years of following the old ways?" Taehyun's face twisted with rage. "I found glory and victory and the respect of the empire." "Did you find peace when you close your eyes at night? Did you find someone who cares whether you live or die? Did you find meaning beyond the next conquest?" Her brother did not answer. Yuna saw something flicker in his eyes, something that might have been doubt or pain. She pressed forward. "I was like you once," she said softly. "I believed that our way was the only way, and that changing meant weakness. But I was wrong, and being wrong does not have to mean defeat. You expect me to accept your human philosophy?" Taehyun demanded. "I expect you to consider that there might be more to existence than war and domination." The Crown Prince turned to his guards. "Seize them both," he ordered. The guards stepped forward. Dae-Young moved to place himself between Yuna and the approaching soldiers. He carried no weapon, but his stance showed he would fight regardless. "Wait," Yuna called out. She walked past Dae-Young and faced the guards directly. before you follow that order, I want you to think about something. The lead guard hesitated. Your Highness, we have our commands. I know, but I am asking you to think for yourselves for one moment. So answer me this. Do you want another war? The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Do you want to watch more of your friends die? Yuna continued. Do you want to burn more worlds and orphan more children and spend your lives fighting people who would rather be your partners? Princess, please do not make this harder, the lead guard said. I am not trying to make it harder, and I am trying to offer you a choice. She gestured toward Daeyum. This man is my husband, and he came here knowing he might die, not because he wanted war, but because he refused to let me face danger alone. So is that the action of an animal or the action of someone worth respecting? The guards looked at Daeyum. He stood calmly with his hands at his sides, and his eyes fixed on Taehyun. There was no fear in his expression. There was only determination and a strange kind of peace. I have no quarrel with any of you, Daeyum said quietly. I do not want to fight the Volanthi, and I do not want to see your people suffer. And I only want the chance to build something better than endless war. Pretty words from a dead man. Taehyun snarled, maybe so. But they are true words. Yuna watched the guards wrestle with their orders. She saw the doubt in their eyes grow stronger. These were soldiers who had seen the peace in action. They had heard stories of humans treating Volanthi prisoners with respect. They had begun to wonder if the old ways really were the only ways. You have all spent your lives following commands without question, Yuna said. I am not asking you to betray our people, and I am asking you to think about what kind of future you want to build. The lead guard lowered his weapon. Your Highness, he said to Taehyun, perhaps we should hear what the princess has to say. I gave you an order, and I am respectfully asking for time to consider, one by one. The other guards lowered their weapons too. Taehyun stood alone with fury and confusion battling on his face. This is treason, he hissed. This is change, Yuna replied. And you can be part of it or you can be left behind. She walked toward her brother slowly. He did not move, but she saw his hands trembling. We can end this here, she said gently. We can sign a new treaty and begin building trust between our peoples. And you can return home as the prince who chose wisdom over pride. Father will never accept this. Father does not have to live with the consequences. But you do, and so do all the soldiers who follow you. Taehyun closed his eyes. When he opened them again, some of the fury had faded. I do not understand you, he admitted. You do not have to understand me yet. But you have to decide what kind of ruler you want to be. A long silence stretched through the chamber. Finally, Taehyun nodded once. I will sign your treaty, he said quietly. But this is not over between us. It does not have to be over, Yuna agreed. It only has to be different. The treaty was signed within the hour. Yuna watched her brother leave with his guards and felt hope blooming in her chest. Change was possible, even for people who had been taught to fear it that night. She stood with Daeyum at the observation deck and watched the stars. We did it, he said softly. We started it, Yuna corrected. The real work comes now. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Yuna smiled and leaned into his warmth. 3 months later, the first Volanthi cultural exchange students arrived on Earth. They were young and curious and full of questions about the strange humans who had somehow won a war through mercy. Yuna watched them explore the capital with wide eyes and wondered how many of them would return home with new ideas and new possibilities. She thought about the frightened princess who had expected to die as a prisoner. She thought about the human captain who had offered marriage instead of chains. She thought about everything that had changed since that moment when Daeyum proposed. She had not believed any being would offer partnership without demanding submission. Now she understood humans did not conquer hearts, they earned them, and she had never been more grateful to be proven wrong. 6 months passed like water flowing through open fingers. Yuna recovered from her wound and threw herself into work that she had never imagined doing. She became a voice for peace between the Federation and the Empire, traveling to border worlds, where Volanthi citizens lived in fear of renewed war. She told them about humans. She told them about kindness without expectation, and strength without cruelty, and love without ownership. Some believed her, some thought she had been corrupted by primitive aliens, but slowly, carefully, the message spread. The peace held because Yuna refused to let it break. Dae-young supported her work in ways that continued to surprise her. He did not try to control her schedule, or approve her speeches, or demand to know where she was. At every moment, he simply asked how her day had gone and listened when she needed to talk and held her when the weight of her mission felt too heavy. This is not how Volanthi marriages work. She told him one evening, as they sat together watching the sunset over New Geneva. How do they work? He asked. The husband commands and the wife obeys. And there is no discussion or partnership, just hierarchy. That sounds lonely, Yuna considered. The word she had never thought of her culture's marriage traditions as lonely before. She had simply accepted them as natural and correct. But now, after months of living as Dae-young's equal, the old ways seemed cold and empty. I think it was lonely, she admitted. I just did not know any other way to live. Dae-young took her hand and laced his fingers through hers. Neither did I. Before the war, he said, I thought my only purpose was to fight and win. But you taught me that building peace is harder and more important. I taught you that. You chose peace when death would have been easier. And you defended that choice against everyone who said you were wrong. So yes, you taught me. Yuna felt warmth spread through her chest. She leaned against his shoulder and watched the colors fade from the sky. These quiet moments had become the treasures of her new life. She found herself smiling at small things now. The way Dae-young laughed at terrible jokes. The way human children waved at her on the street. The way coffee tasted on cold mornings. She had learned to love. The word no longer frightened her. The news came on a gray morning in late autumn. Crown. Prince Seovang Taehyun, her eldest brother and heir to the Volanthi throne, had massed a fleet of 200 warships at the border. He had declared Yuna a traitor to the Empire and demanded her return for execution. If the humans refused, he would restart the war. Yuna read the message 3 times before she could accept that the words were real. Her brother had always been cold and ambitious and convinced of Volanthi's superiority, but she had hoped that 6 months of peace might have changed him. She had hoped. Wrong. The Federation Council met in emergency session. Yuna watched from the gallery as politicians argued about strategy and resources and acceptable losses. Some wanted to surrender her to avoid war. Others wanted to fight immediately before the Volanthi fleet grew stronger. No one asked what she wanted. Dae-young stood and demanded the floor. Princess Yuna is a citizen of this federation now, he declared. We do not surrender our people to executioners, and we do not hide behind those who have the courage to seek peace. Then, what do you suggest? Admiral Choi asked coldly. Should we sacrifice thousands of lives for one alien? I suggest we let her speak for herself. Every eye in the chamber turned to Yuna. She stood slowly and walked to the speaking platform. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her voice did not shake. I will go to my brother, she announced. I will negotiate with him directly and try to make him understand that war benefits no one. The chamber erupted in argument. Some called her brave. Others called her foolish. Admiral Choi simply laughed. You would walk into the arms of someone who wants you dead. The admiral asked. I would walk into the arms of my brother and remind him that he does not have to be a monster. He will kill you. Perhaps. But even if he does, My death will not give him the war he wants, so the peace will survive me. Dae-young pushed through the crowd and grabbed her shoulders. I will not let you do this alone, he said fiercely. You cannot come with me, because your presence will only provoke him more. Then he can be provoked, because human marriage means facing danger together. Yuna stared at him. What did you say? I said we face danger together, not apart, and I will not send my wife to die alone. The word hit her like a physical force. Wife not possession or trophy or diplomatic asset. Wife partner equal. You would risk your life for me, she whispered. I would risk everything for you. Yuna felt tears burn in her eyes. She had spent her entire life believing that love was weakness and attachment was foolishness. Dae-young had proven her wrong in 1,000 small ways. Now he proved her wrong in the largest way possible. Then, we go together. She agreed. They departed the next morning on a small diplomatic vessel. The journey to the border took 4 days. Yuna spent the time preparing for a confrontation she might not survive. She wrote letters to the people who had become important. To her, she recorded messages for the Volanti citizens who had started to believe in peace. She held Dae-young close each night and memorized the feeling of his arms around her. On the third night, she asked him the question that had haunted her since their first meeting. Why did you really propose to me? Dae-young was quiet for a long moment. I told you before, he finally said. I proposed because it was the only way to end the war. That was the practical reason. But was there something more? He turned to face her in the darkness. When I walked onto your ship, I expected to find a defeated enemy, he admitted. Instead, I found a woman who faced death with more dignity than anyone I had ever seen. And I knew that someone so brave deserved better than execution. So you proposed to save my life. I proposed because I could not stand the thought of you dying. And I did not understand why until later. What did you understand later? Vang reached out and touched her face gently. I understood that I was already falling in love with you. Even in that first moment, Yuna closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was not their first kiss, but it was different than the others. This one held no uncertainty or hesitation. This one was a promise. I love you, she said against his lips. I love you too. They held each other until sleep came, and when the morning arrived with all its dangers, they faced it together. The border station called Harmony Point grew larger in their viewport, somewhere inside. Her brother waited with anger and ambition, and the power to destroy everything they had built. But Yuna was no longer afraid. She had something worth fighting for now. She had something worth dying for. She had love. Earth was beautiful in ways that Yuna had never imagined. The Resolute descended through white clouds and blue sky and emerged above a sprawling city of glass towers and green parks and rivers that sparkled in the morning sun. This was New Geneva, the capital of the United Terran Federation, and it would be her new home. Yuna had expected a primitive world scarred by the nuclear war that nearly destroyed humanity 2 centuries ago. Instead, she found a civilization that had rebuilt itself into something magnificent. The streets were clean and filled with people of every skin color and body type walking together in a parent. His children played in public gardens while their parents watched from nearby benches. There were no soldiers on corners or weapons visible anywhere. How is this possible? Yuna whispered as their transport flew over the city. Captain Kang sat beside her with a small smile on his face. We learned hard lessons from our mistakes, he explained. The war taught us that destruction is easy, but building is hard. So, we chose to build. The Volanti Empire has never rebuilt anything, Yuna admitted. We simply conquer new territory when we exhaust the old. Perhaps that could change. Yuna did not answer. The idea of her people changing their fundamental nature seemed impossible. But then again, she had thought humans were impossible too. The transport landed at a government complex surrounded by gardens and fountains. Diplomats and officials waited on a wide platform, their faces showing curiosity and caution, and something that might have been hope. Captain Kang helped her down from the transport and walked beside her toward the waiting crowd. He did not hold her arm or guide her like property. He simply stayed close enough that she could feel his presence without being overshadowed by it. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of meetings and negotiations and cultural briefings. Human diplomats asked endless questions about Balanthi customs and politics. Yuna answered honestly because deception seemed pointless. Now, she learned that humans valued something called transparency, which meant telling the truth even when lies would be easier. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for a warm day in late spring. Yuna expected a grand display designed to impress the galaxy and prove human dominance. Instead, Captain Kang asked her what she wanted. "What do you mean?" she asked in confusion. "It is your wedding too," he explained. "You should have a say in how it happens. The Valanthi brides do not have opinions about their ceremonies. You are not just a Valanthi bride anymore." Yuna stared at him for a long moment. No one had ever asked her preferences about anything important. Her role in life had been determined at birth, and her path had been chosen by others. The idea that she could shape her own future felt strange and frightening and wonderful. "I would like something small," she finally said, "with few witnesses and simple food and music that does not make my ears hurt." Captain Kang laughed at that last request. "Human music is too loud for you. Human music is like being attacked by sound. Then we will find something softer." The ceremony took place in a small garden with only 20 guests. Yuna wore a dress that combined Valanthi elegance with human simplicity. Silver fabric flowing around her tall form like water. Captain Kang wore his dress uniform, cleaned and pressed, but still carrying the weight of his service. They exchanged vows that a human priest had helped them write together. Yuna promised to face the future with honesty and courage. Daeyoung promised to honor her strength and support her growth. Neither of them promised to love, because love could not be commanded. But as Yuna looked into his dark eyes and spoke her words, she felt something warm blooming in her chest that she could not name. The reception was interrupted by Admiral Choi Min-seo, a tall woman with iron gray hair and cold eyes. She pushed through the guests and stopped in front of Yuna with barely hidden contempt. "So this is the prize Captain Kang brought home from his victory," the Admiral said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "A Valanthi princess to parade around like a trophy." The garden fell silent. Yuna felt her spine stiffen with familiar anger. She opened her mouth to deliver a cutting response that would shame this human in front of her peers. Daeyoung spoke first. "Admiral Choi, you dishonor yourself and this uniform," he said in a voice that carried without shouting. Princess Yuna chose peace when she could have chosen death, and she showed more courage in that moment than anyone who only knows how to make war. The Admiral's face reddened. "She is the enemy. She was the enemy," Daeyoung corrected. "Now she is my wife and a bridge between our peoples. And anyone who cannot see that value is blind to what victory really means." Admiral Choi looked around the garden and found no support in the watching faces. She turned and left without another word. Yuna watched her go and then looked at Daeyoung with new eyes. "You defended me," she said quietly. "Of course I did. Why? Because you deserve to be defended. And because she was wrong." Yuna thought about all the times she had insulted him and tested him and pushed him away. He had never responded with anger or punishment. He had simply waited for her to be ready. "Thank you," she whispered. It was the first time she had thanked him for anything. His smile in return was worth more than all the treasures of Valanthi Empire. 2 weeks later, the assassins came. Yuna was walking through the government complex when she noticed 3 Valanthi figures moving through the crowd with too much purpose. She recognized the way they walked and the way their eyes scanned for threats. These were hunters from the Shadow Guard. Her brother's personal killers? They were here for Dae-young. Yuna did not stop to think or plan. She simply moved. She found Dae-young in a conference room reviewing trade proposals. She burst through the door and grabbed his arm. "We need to leave now," she said urgently. "What is wrong?" "My brother sent assassins, and they are coming for you?" Dae-young's expression hardened, but he did not panic. He pulled out his communication device and spoke rapidly in a language Yuna did not know. Within seconds, human security forces flooded the building. The next few minutes were chaos. Gunfire echoed through the corridors as the Shadow Guard fought against human soldiers. Yuna stayed close to Dae-young as they moved through back passages towards safety. They almost made it. The last assassin appeared from nowhere with a plasma pistol raised and aimed at Dae-young's heart. Yuna did not think. She threw herself in front of the weapon. The blast hit her in the chest and sent fire through her entire body. She collapsed as human soldiers killed the assassin, and Dae-young caught her before she hit the ground. "Yuna!" he shouted. "Stay with me." She looked up at his face and saw terror in his eyes. Not anger at the attack or satisfaction that the threat was ended. Just fear for her. "Why did you do that?" he demanded. Yuna tried to smile, but the pain made it difficult. "Because you are worth protecting," she managed to say. Then the darkness took her. She woke 3 days later in a human medical facility. Dae-young was sitting beside her bed with dark circles under his eyes and stubble covering his jaw. He looked like he had not slept since she was hurt. "You saved my life," he said when he saw her eyes open. "I could not let you die." Yuna replied weakly. "Why?" She thought about the question for a long moment. She thought about all his small kindnesses and patient teaching. She thought about the way he defended her against his own people. She thought about the warmth in her chest that she had refused to name. "Because I could not bear to lose you," she admitted. Dae-young took her hand and held it gently. "Neither could I," he said. Yuna closed her eyes and felt tears slip down her silver cheeks. For the first time since her capture, she was not afraid of the future. She was looking forward to it. The Volanthi flagship celestial throne drifted through the cold darkness of space. Its engines dead and its shields broken beyond repair. Princess Yuna Sealving stood on the command deck and watched the human warships surround her vessel like predators circling wounded prey. She had lost. The battle had lasted only 6 hours, but it had cost her everything. 300 years of Volanthi naval tradition had taught her that superior technology always won against primitive species. The humans had proven that teaching wrong in the most painful way possible. Yuna looked at her reflection in the darkened viewscreen and saw silver skin covered in dust and small cuts. Her violet eyes showed no fear because she had already accepted what came next. Volanthi law was clear on this matter. A commander who lost a flagship faced execution. A royal who fell into enemy hands faced something far worse. She had heard stories about what happened to captured nobles throughout galactic history. The Volanthi Empire had committed such acts themselves during their 10,000 years of conquest. Now it was her turn to suffer what her ancestors had inflicted on others. The deck shook as a human boarding craft attached to the hull. Yuna straightened her torn uniform and lifted her chin. She would die with dignity. Her advisor, an old male named Park Junho, rushed to her side with panic in his golden eyes. "Your Highness, we must hide you," he begged. "The humans cannot know your identity." Yuna shook her head slowly. "They already know," she replied. "Their intelligence networks identified me weeks ago, and running would only delay the inevitable." The doors to the command deck exploded inward. Human soldiers poured through the opening with weapons raised and voices shouting commands in their strange language. Yuna did not flinch. She had prepared herself for this moment. Since the battle turned against her, the soldiers spread through the room and secured every corner. before a single figure walked through the ruined doorway. He was tall for a human, with black hair cut short and dark eyes that scanned the room with careful attention. His uniform marked him as a captain, and the name on his chest read Kang Dae-young. Yuna had studied his file before the battle. He was 34 years old, born on Earth in a nation called Korea, decorated for valor in 3 separate conflicts. The reports described him as dangerous but fair. She wondered if fairness meant anything when victory gave him absolute power over her fate. Captain Kang walked toward her with steady steps and stopped 3 meters away. His soldiers kept their weapons trained on the Volante crew, but he seemed almost relaxed. "Princess Yuna Sealving," he said in accented but clear Volante. "I am Captain Kang Dae-young of the United Terran Federation ship Resolute, and I am here to discuss surrender terms." Yuna blinked in surprise. She had expected demands or threats or perhaps immediate violence. She had not expected a formal introduction. "You know our language," she observed. "I studied it for 2 years," he replied. Learning to speak with potential allies seemed more useful than learning to kill them. "We are not allies," Yuna said coldly. "We are enemies, and you have defeated me." Captain Kang nodded once. "The battle is over," he agreed. "But that does not mean we must remain enemies forever. So I came to offer terms." Park Junho stepped forward with his hands raised in a gesture of submission. "Whatever you want, we will provide it," the old advisor said quickly. "Just spare the lives of our crew." Captain Kang looked at the advisor with an expression Yuna could not read. "I want 3 things," the human said. "First, the release of all human prisoners held in your cargo base. And second, access to your repair materials so we can fix our damaged ships." He paused, and Yuna waited for the third demand. This would be where he revealed his true nature. This would be where he claimed her as his prize. "Third," Captain Kang continued, "I want a formal peace treaty between the United Terran Federation and the Volante Empire." Yuna stared at him. "That is all?" she asked in disbelief. "That is all?" he confirmed. Park Junho shook his head rapidly. No, this cannot be right," the advisor insisted. "You have captured a royal princess and a flagship of the Eternal Fleet. So surely you want something more, perhaps tribute or territory, or—" He trailed off. Unable to say what everyone was thinking, Captain Kang's expression hardened slightly. "I am not interested in claiming people as property," he said firmly. "The Federation abolished such practices centuries ago." "But our customs," Park Junho protested. "Your victory gives you rights under galactic law. And if you do not exercise those rights, the Emperor will see it as an insult." Yuna understood her advisor's concern, even as it disgusted her Volante. Culture demanded that defeated enemies pay proper tribute to their conquerors. If the humans asked for too little, the Emperor would assume they were mocking him. He would restart the war just to prove the Empire's honor. Captain Kang seemed to understand this as well. He frowned and looked at Yuna directly. "What would satisfy your Emperor?" he asked. Yuna hesitated. The answer was obvious, but speaking it aloud felt like surrender of a different kind. "A political marriage," she finally admitted, "between a member of the royal family and a high-ranking human official. As such unions have ended wars throughout Volante history." Captain Kang was quiet for a long moment. Yuna watched emotions flicker across his face, and she recognized frustration, reluctance, and something that might have been determination. "If that is what it takes to end this war," he said slowly, "then I will do it." Yuna felt the blood drain from her face. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Captain Kang met her eyes without flinching. "I am saying that I will marry you, Princess, if that is the price of peace." The command deck fell completely silent. Even the human soldiers seemed shocked by their captains. Words. Yuna's mind raced through possibilities. and found no acceptable explanation. This had to be a trick or a trap or some human game she did not understand. You cannot be serious, she said. I am completely serious, Captain Kang replied. I watched good people die today on both sides of this battle, and if marrying you prevents more death, then I consider it a small price to pay. You do not even know me. I know that you commanded this ship with courage and skill, and I know that you surrendered when continuing to fight would have cost more lives. So I know enough. Park Junho grabbed Yuna's arm with trembling fingers. Your Highness, this could work, he said urgently. A marriage to a human war hero would satisfy the Emperor's honor and end the conflict. Yuna pulled her arm free and stared at Captain Kang. She searched his face for any sign of hidden cruelty or secret desire for dominance. She found nothing but tired sincerity. Why would you sacrifice yourself for people who were trying to kill you hours ago? She demanded. Captain Kang smiled slightly, though there was no joy in the expression. Because that is what humans do, he answered. We find ways to turn enemies into something else. Yuna did not know how to respond. Her entire understanding of the universe told her that this man should be claiming her as a trophy, not offering himself as a partner. She had prepared for humiliation and pain. She had not prepared for kindness. Very well. She heard herself say, I accept your proposal. Captain Kang nodded once. Then let us end this war together. As he turned to give orders to his soldiers, Yuna watched him with new eyes. She did not trust him. She could not trust him. But somewhere deep in her chest, a tiny spark of hope had begun to burn. Perhaps she had been wrong about humans. Perhaps she had been wrong about everything. The human ship Resolute was nothing like what Yuna had expected. She had imagined dark corridors and primitive technology and soldiers who watched her with hungry eyes. Instead, she found clean hallways filled with natural light, and crew members who nodded politely when she passed. Captain Kang had given her guest quarters near his own cabin. The room was small by Volanti standards, but comfortable, with a soft bed and a window that showed the stars rushing past. She was not locked in. She was not guarded. She was simply there. Like any other passenger on a journey, the first 3 days felt like waiting for a trap to spring. Yuna barely slept and barely ate and spent hours staring at the door, expecting soldiers to burst through and drag her to some terrible fate. The soldiers never came. On the 4th day, Captain Kang knocked on her door and invited her to dinner in the officers' mess. Yuna accepted because refusing would show weakness, and she still had her pride, even if she had lost everything else. The mess hall was crowded with human officers, eating and laughing and arguing about things she did not understand. They fell silent when she entered, but the silence lasted only a moment before they returned to their conversations. No one stared at her like she was a monster or a prize. They simply accepted her presence and continued with their meals. Captain Kang guided her to a table near the window and sat across from her. A crew member brought plates of food that looked strange but smelled surprisingly good. It is called bibimbap, the captain explained. Rice with vegetables and meat and a spicy sauce, and it was my mother's favorite dish. Yuna picked up the metal sticks that humans used instead of proper utensils and struggled to lift the food to her mouth. Captain Kang watched her clumsy attempts with what might have been amusement. Would you prefer a spoon? He offered. I will learn your ways. Yuna replied stubbornly. She spent the next 10 minutes fighting with the chopsticks while the captain ate in patient silence. By the time she finished her meal, her fingers ached, but she had managed to eat every bite. You are very determined, Captain Kang observed. I am Volanti, Yuna answered. We do not surrender to challenges. You surrendered to me. The words hit her like a physical blow. She looked up sharply. Expecting to see mockery or cruelty in his eyes, she found only honest curiosity. I surrendered to save my crew. She said carefully, "That is different from giving up." Captain Kang nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I have made similar choices. Have you lost a battle before?" "Several times. And the first loss almost broke me." Yuna leaned forward, despite herself. "What happened?" The captain set down his chopsticks and looked out the window at the passing stars. "I was 26 years old and commanding my first ship," he said quietly. "We encountered raiders attacking a civilian transport, and I ordered an attack that should have been a simple rescue mission." He paused, and Yuna saw old pain move across his face. The raiders had backup waiting behind a nearby moon, and they caught us between two forces. And I lost half my crew before we escaped, so for months afterward, I could not close my eyes without seeing their faces. "How did you recover?" Yuna asked. "I learned that failure is not the end," Captain Kang replied. "It is just a lesson that costs more than we wanted to pay." Yuna sat with those words for a long moment. No Volante commander had ever spoken to her so honestly about defeat in her culture. Losing meant shame and silence and eventual execution. The idea that failure could be a teacher rather than a death sentence felt almost revolutionary. Over the following days, Captain Kang continued to visit her. He brought books about Earth history and music from different human cultures, and strange foods that ranged from delicious to terrible. He asked questions about Volante society and listened carefully to her answers without judgment or mockery. Yuna tested him. Constantly, she insulted his ship and his crew and his species. She demanded luxuries that the vessel could not provide. She refused meals and then complained about hunger. Captain Kang responded to every test with patience when she insulted him. He asked what had upset her when she made impossible demands. He explained what he could and could not provide when she refused to eat. He simply left food outside her door and waited for her to change her mind on the 10th day. Yuna asked him directly why he was being so kind. "Because you deserve kindness." He answered simply, "I am your enemy. You were my enemy," he corrected. "Now you are my future wife, and I treat the people in my life with respect, even if they treat you poorly." Captain Kang smiled his small, tired smile, especially then, because angry people are usually hurting people, and adding more anger only makes things worse. Yuna did not know how to respond to such philosophy. Volante culture taught that power demanded respect and weakness invited destruction. The idea of responding to hostility with kindness seemed like a recipe for being conquered. But the humans had not been conquered. They had won a war against a superior enemy through tactics and determination, and something else that Yuna was only beginning to understand. On the 15th day, raiders attacked. The resolute alarm screamed through the ship as energy blasts struck the hull and sent tremors through the floor. Yuna braced herself in her quarters and waited for death or rescue or capture. The door burst open and two human soldiers rushed in. "Princess, we need to move you to a secure location," one of them shouted. Yuna followed them through chaotic corridors filled with running crew members and flashing emergency lights. They reached a reinforced room deep in the ship's core and sealed the door behind them through the communication system. Yuna heard Captain Kang's voice giving orders with calm authority. The battle lasted 2 hours when it ended. The Resolute had driven off the raiders but suffered significant damage. Yuna emerged from hiding to find the corridors filled with wounded crew members and exhausted medics. She searched for Captain Kang and found him in the engineering section, helping to carry an injured woman toward the medical bay. His uniform was torn and burned in several places, and blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. "Captain," Yuna called out. He looked up and relief flooded his features. "You are safe," he breathed. "Thank the stars. You are hurt," she pointed out. "It is nothing serious. You should go to the medics." Captain Kang shook his head and gestured to the wounded engineer in his arms. "She needs them more than I do. And there are others still trapped in the damaged sections." Yuna watched him carry the woman away and then turned back toward the territory. Danger without hesitation, she watched him work for hours, pulling survivors from wreckage and comforting dying crew members, and never stopping to rest or tend his own wounds. When the rescue operations finally ended, Yuna found him sitting alone in a quiet corner of the ship with his head in his hands. She sat down beside him without speaking. "We lost 19 people today," he said softly. "I am sorry. I knew their names, and I knew their families, and I will have to write letters to each one." Yuna had never written such letters herself. Volante commanders did not apologize for deaths in battle because death was simply the price of war, but she saw how heavily these losses weighed on Captain Kang. She saw that he felt each death as a personal failure. "You saved many more than you lost," she offered. "That does not make the 19 hurt less." Yuna hesitated and then placed her hand on his arm. It was the first time she had willingly touched him since their meeting. "Why do you care so much?" she asked gently. Captain Kang looked at her with eyes full of exhaustion and grief. "Because they trusted me to bring them home safely, and I failed them." Yuna understood then that she had been wrong about humans from the very beginning. They were not primitive or weak or cruel. They were something far more dangerous. They were beings who felt every death as their own failure and every victory as a shared triumph. They were beings who loved so deeply that loss could break them, and somehow that capacity for pain made them stronger than any Volante warrior she had ever known.